Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're stepping into a space we all completely take for granted. We use them every single day, usually without a second thought. But let's be honest, there's a unique, deeply rooted psychological dread in being trapped inside enclosed automated machinery. We trust these little metal boxes completely, right up until the very moment they fail us. So what happens when the mundane machinery of our daily lives crosses over into something entirely inexplicable? Well, today, we're looking at 3 chilling case studies where everyday elevators bypassed reality and literally descended into the supernatural. Have you ever stepped into an elevator entirely alone and just felt wrong? You know that primal instinct telling you you're absolutely not alone. Maybe the doors closed just a little too slowly, leaving you staring out into an empty lobby. Or maybe the lights flickered above you for no apparent reason, or the mechanical hum sounded almost like breathing? Today's explainer dissects 3 distinct, documented reports where the elevator didn't just malfunction, it stopped somewhere completely impossible.
Let's dive right into case study 1, the forgotten floor.
Picture this. It's midnight, 2023. A college student named Ethan walks into the empty lobby of his Chicago apartment building after a grueling late-night study session. He steps inside, presses 14, and the doors close. The ascent is completely normal. Smooth, routine, right up until the elevator comes to a violent, abrupt halt right there, the 13th floor. Now, building management had deliberately skipped the 13th floor due to superstition. Pretty common, right? So architecturally, this floor did not exist. Yet as Ethan stood there frozen, the digital display glowed with a clear, undeniable 13. And then the doors began to slowly slide open. He wasn't looking at some dusty, mechanical maintenance shaft. He was looking at a dim, endless liminal space. Sickly yellow lights were just sputtering and flickering overhead. The carpet beneath his feet was horribly stained and looked ancient, completely alien to the modern aesthetic of his building. It was this long hallway that just stretched endlessly into pure, suffocating darkness. But the most unnerving part? There were absolutely no doors. No apartment numbers visible on any of the walls. Just a forgotten, abandoned stretch of nothingness. Pure panic instantly set in. Ethan practically smashed the closed door button over and over until the doors finally shut and took him up to his actual apartment. But the true horror actually hit the next morning. Ethan marched straight down to the building manager, who stated unequivocally there is no 13th floor. And when they pulled up the security footage, it perfectly contradicted Ethan's trauma. The tape just showed Ethan entering the lobby, the doors closing, and the elevator traveling in one smooth, totally uninterrupted trip directly to the 14th floor. No stop, no opening doors, just nothing. Ethan actually moved out a week later, but not before seeing that number 13 flash on the panel one last time as he was leaving. Yeah, no thank you. Moving on to case study 2, the woman who wasn't there. We're at a hospital in Seattle. It's 2 a.m. A worker named Sarah has just finished an exhausting late shift and steps into the elevator to head down to the parking garage. She thinks she's got the ride to herself, but literally a split second before the heavy metal doors seal shut, a woman slips inside. They begin this slow, highly claustrophobic descent. Floor 8, floor 7, floor 6. Now the woman standing with Sarah is deeply unsettling. She's wearing an old-fashioned drab gray dress. Her skin is so utterly pale it almost looks colorless, and she keeps her head pointed firmly at the floor, absolutely dead silent. Sarah feels this creeping unease filling the enclosed space, but she tries to just brush it off as they continue to drop. Then, out of nowhere, the elevator lights violently flicker. When they finally stabilize, Sarah glances at the mirrored wall at the back of the cabin. She sees her own tired reflection staring back at her, sure, but the pale woman in the gray dress? Her reflection was completely empty. There was absolutely nothing there, just the blank, mirrored wall of the elevator. A freezing chill washed over Sarah, and it was at that precise, terrifying moment the woman slowly raised her head. Her eyes were not simply dark, they were completely black. Deep, empty voids totally devoid of humanity. And as she locked that hollow, soulless gaze onto Sarah, her face stretched into a long, incredibly unnatural smile. A smile that absolutely did not reach those empty eyes. The elevator immediately jerked to a violent, sudden stop between floors. The main cabin lights instantly died. For several agonizing seconds, there was only pure darkness. When the dim emergency lights finally clicked on, casting these long, creepy shadows across the cabin, the pale woman was completely gone, vanished into thin air. Sarah was trapped, completely alone, and utterly terrified until the doors eventually pried open. And much like Ethan's story, when hospital security pulled the surveillance tape, it showed Sarah entering the elevator completely alone. Less than a month later, Sarah quit her job. I mean, wouldn't you? Which brings us to Case Study 3, The Last Ride. It's 2024. A maintenance worker named Carlos is assigned to inspect the very last remaining operational elevator in a massive, completely abandoned 30-story office building right before it's slated for demolition. This place has basically sat empty and rotting in the dark for nearly 10 years. Carlos steps into the dusty elevator and hits 30. Halfway up, the whole elevator shudders and grinds to a halt. The lights dim. Suddenly, every single button on the control panel lights up at the exact same time. He hits the emergency stop. Nothing. And then, right at the very top of the panel, a brand new button materializes. Floor 31. It's glowing this angry, pulsing red. The building structurally ends at 30. Yet, the elevator lurches upward, climbing past the 30th floor into physical space that simply should not exist. When the doors finally slid open on floor 31, Carlos didn't see an empty rooftop or some unfinished mechanical room. No, he saw a complete and total break from reality. He was staring out into a fully furnished, blindingly bright, active office space. Computers were humming, desks were perfectly organized, but the people. There were dozens of workers sitting at every single desk, and they were all wearing identical black suits. They weren't typing, they weren't speaking. The literal moment those elevator doors opened, every single one of them was already staring in dead silence directly at Carlos, just waiting for him. Pure survival instinct kicked in immediately. Carlos smashed the closed door button, but the doors completely refused to budge. Then, in perfect, terrifying unison, every single entity stood up from their desks, their eyes locked right on him. Carlos frantically slammed his fist into the panel over and over and over again. Finally, the door slammed shut, and the elevator dropped like an absolute stone, so incredibly fast that Carlos nearly blacked out from the G-force. It plummeted until it abruptly, violently halted safely in the lobby. Carlos bolted from that building and absolutely refused to ever step foot inside it again. When his coworkers returned the very next day to check on it, the elevator panel was completely normal. The highest button was 30. The 31st floor was just gone. But here's the kicker. Months later, right before the wrecking balls finally brought the whole structure down, an overnight security worker reported something chilling. He saw bright fluorescent lights blazing late at night, coming from a non-existent upper floor at the very top of the building. So, we've looked at the accounts. Now ask yourself, which of these encounters actually disturbed you the most? Was it Ethan's forgotten 13th floor and the creeping dread of an endless, abandoned liminal hallway? Was it Sarah's terrifying, claustrophobic trap with an eyeless, reflectionless entity? Or maybe it was Carlos's brush with a hostile, totally impossible reality up on the 31st floor? Each of these represents a completely unique manifestation of an everyday environment just utterly failing us. You know, the scariest places really aren't haunted houses. They're the places we use every single day. The true horror lies in the mundane, in the total subversion of our basic routines. We step into these metal boxes trusting the engineering, trusting reality itself to hold together. But the next time an elevator you're riding suddenly stops, shudders, and the lights start to flicker, well, you might want to think twice before stepping out. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Stay safe out there and, seriously, always watch the doors.